Hey everyone, welcome to the West Coast Best Coast Football Show. Looking ahead to Week 8 for West Coast college football, former Pac-12 teams. Obviously, Friday night, Oregon beats Purdue 35-0. Dylan Gabriel great in the game again. Only a handful of incompletions. Jordan James a couple touchdowns. Oregon's the best team in the Pac-12, and it really, it's kind of fitting. I did deal with some technical issues getting the show up in advance of that game. But, I felt Oregon was going to win. Some people thought it might be a trap. Purdue's just awful. They're just awful. So that's not really the surprise in all this. Or if we're going to talk about ranked teams like we do on this show, only one ranked team, and it is Oregon at number 2. I would anticipate they stay there for now. I mean, they could move up to number 1 if somehow Georgia beats Texas, but you could expect that maybe Georgia could get some more favorable things, but also Georgia's got a loss. So Oregon's in a pretty good spot right now. They've got some interesting games coming down the pipeline, and obviously we'll see what happens with Penn State, and they could be in a good position to potentially go to the Big Ten championship in their first year in the Big Ten. So ASU, Arizona State's third in others receiving votes. We talk about the ranked teams. Washington State 5th out of the top 25, Utah 10th, and USC 12th. Man, this was a bad last week. Week 7 was a bad week for former Pac-12 teams. A lot of crushing losses, and this 12 pack that I have was really difficult for me because obviously number 1 is Oregon. Spoiler alert. And you know what? We'll go I'm not going to go from 12 to 1. I'm going to go from 1 to 12 because it got really difficult once you get past number 1, because Oregon is clearly the best team in this league. Honestly, if Boise State were actually if I wanted to count them, they would be the second best team in the Pac-12, making up of all these former teams, because Boise State's just playing out of their minds right now. And you could say, oh, they're playing Mountain West teams. So it's like, they're playing good football, man. And Ashton Jeanty is unbelievable. And I'll talk about Ashton Jeanty in a second. Some historical statistics for all you people, and including Travis Hunter, trying to diminish what the Boise State running back has been doing through the first handful of games this season. So Oregon's number 1 in my 12 pack. I have Arizona State at 2. In my opinion, the best story in college football on the West Coast. It's the best story in college football, not named Indiana, who is on Big Noon Kickoff this week. So, but yeah, Arizona State's 5-1. They were picked dead last in this remade Big 12. Kenny Dillingham 3 wins last year. They're already at 5. They can get to bowl eligibility if they beat Cincinnati on Saturday. Like, Arizona State's an amazing story. So I got them at number 2. I got Washington State at 3. Came back up off the mat after getting just run over by Boise State. But who isn't getting run over by Boise State at this point? So Washington State at 3. I got USC at 4. Really, like, even though I'm annoyed that Lincoln Riley keeps going to this line, they really are a couple plays away from being 6-0. Like, they've blown 3 massive opportunities. Like, they lost a game they absolutely should have won against Minnesota. They lost a game they absolutely should have won at Michigan. And then this game against Penn State at home, up 14 against a top 5 team, and you can't close it down. You have the ball in your hands in the final 2 minutes. Can't figure out how to score then. You can't kick. You can miss a field goal in overtime, and you can't figure out how to stop Tyler Warren. It's just like so many missed opportunities, and USC's season is effectively over. Really, they're just fighting for a bowl berth at this point because their aspirations in the Big Ten that started off their sky-high expectations after they beat LSU in that first game of the season. They haven't won a road game. And they got to go all the way to Maryland this week. And Maryland's pissed off, but Maryland's not very good. They should win that game. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But I got USC at 4. I got Utah at 5, really out of respect for Kyle Whittingham and how great of a coach he is. Losing Cam Rising sucks. But clearly the hand was limiting him. It was a season-ending injury. It stinks. He could come back for his 8th season of football. Utah's defense and running game this is going to turn into what last season was in the Pac-12 for Utah. And their ceiling is really low. We'll see what Isaac Wilson's made of at quarterback. But I got Utah at 5. I got Colorado dropping to 6. I was actually really impressed by the Buffs, but they blew a game that they absolutely should have gotten against Kansas State. They were in that game. Shedeur plays well. They're down significant receivers. Travis Hunter doesn't finish the game. and Kansas State scores at the end, and they can't come up with a drive at the end on their end. In Colorado, this is what they are. I mean, and we'll see what they're made of. They go to Arizona this week. That'll be a tough spot for them. Arizona's been really disappointing. But yeah, Colorado, this is what they are. They're kind of middle of the road. Washington at 7, first time they've really been, destroyed this season. All their losses have been relatively close. They lost at Rutgers. They lost at home to Washington State. Games they both should have gotten, but then Iowa just runs over them. Caleb Johnson just goes absolutely nuts. Multiple touchdowns. Caleb Johnson's been pretty much doing this to everybody this season, and if not for Ashton Jeanty, Caleb Johnson's probably being talked about as one of the best running backs in America. But Washington gets smacked. They kind of get a little dose of reality for themselves. So I got them at 7. I've got Arizona at 8. Man, it's just like they've really been humbled in a lot of the big-time games that they've played this year against top-tier Big 12 opponents. Kansas State wasn't technically a Big 12 game or in the conference, but that was really disappointing to see them get blown out there. They blow a game at home against Texas Tech. Shout out Andrew Marks. They've had a really solid season under Joey McGuire. They only have one loss on the season, so they're near the top of the Big 12. And then, they get smacked by BYU. And BYU, don't look now, is a really good team, man. It's just like BYU. That's a game that they were barking up the wrong tree right there. It felt like a losing battle going to Provo. So yeah, I got Arizona at 8. I've got Oregon State at 9, a tough loss against Nevada. But I really like the way this team is built. They're built on their defense, even though they gave up a ton of points in that game. Their running game is really good. I like what Trent Bray's doing in a really tough spot. And, they've done a really good job this season, considering all the circumstances surrounding them and obviously, them being left behind. Cal's at 10. Man, I was really high on this team early in the season, but between the Florida State loss, the blow in that game at home against Miami, and then this past week against Pitt, losing by 2 points, you basically held them to one explosive play. Eli Holstein was nothing in this game, and Desmond Reed gets bust off a 70-yard run, and that's all you really gave up in this game. And you lose 17-15, you can't kick a field goal at the end of the game. That's Cal's season in a nutshell, and it's just like, it's hard for me to put them any higher. It's just, they've missed so many opportunities. Losing to Florida State is just awful this year. It's just a really bad look. I really had better expectations for this Cal team. 11, I've got Stanford. What can you say? They're just not talented enough to contend with some of these top-tier teams in the ACC. They're really their Super Bowl, their bowl game of the season was beating Syracuse on a Friday night at the Carrier Dome. Good for them. Good for Troy Taylor. I really don't have a whole hell of a lot of optimism. They get destroyed by Notre Dame. But Notre Dame's got their one loss really, like their mulligan, and it seems like they're kind of riding back to ships. But yeah, Stanford's gonna have tough sledding the rest of the way, and then UCLA's at 12. I've said UCLA's the worst team of these former Pac-12 teams. It's just like they had a game, man, against Minnesota, and then they couldn't get a stop at the end, and then there's an interception, and Minnesota somehow gets the sweep of the former SoCal schools, which is insane to even fathom. Minnesota being the first team in the Big Ten to do that. So yeah, that's my 12 pack. Really quickly before I get into these games in Week 8, I need to point out something about Ashton Jeanty because Travis Hunter was quoted on RG3's podcast and basically said something to the effect of, "Oh, if I had 95 catches." Everybody would be talking about me having crazy things, basically diminishing what Ashton Jeanty has accomplished. Like we basically more or less saying we've seen this before. First of all, that's ridiculous. But then I have some numbers, and thanks to Fox Sports and their college football people for backing this up, because through 5 games, just want to give you guys perspective. Through 5 games, the last 3 running back Heisman winners, there have been 3. Reggie Bush in 2005, Mark Ingram in 2009, and Derrick Henry in 2015. We can debate 2009 and 2015 that it should have went to a Stanford run back, Toby Gerhart in 2009, and Christian McCaffrey in 2015. But those are the last 3 running back winners of the Heisman Trophy. So, through 5 games, here are the statistics of those 3 men. Reggie Bush in 2005, he had 601 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, 71 carries. Okay. Mark Ingram. through 5 games, had 487 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, and 83 carries. Derrick Henry in 2015, 570 rushing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, 93 carries. Ashton Jeanty through 5 games, 1,031 rushing yards, 16 rushing touchdowns on 95 carries. It's not even close. It's not even close. These are the 3 measuring sticks. It's because it's hard for a running back in this college football where there's so much emphasis on the quarterback and gaining yards. I mean, hell, a friggin' wide receivers won it more recently in Devontae Smith in the COVID season. But Ashton Jeanty nearly doubles up every single one of these guys. The closest one is Reggie Bush, which was 20 years ago. And Reggie Bush had, 24 less carries, which is kind of impressive. But Ashton Jeanty's still averaging like 10 yards a carry. It's insane what's going on. Derrick Henry had almost the same amount of carries almost 10 years ago and has like half the yardage. This is not a discussion, everybody. Ashton Jeanty should win the Heisman. And the only reason that this is even a discussion right now is because of who he plays for. He plays for Boise State. Everybody is trying to diminish. But if you are trying to diminish it for that, go watch film and see that this guy is getting hit at the line of scrimmage and is still running 60 yards down the field. He is getting yards after contact. And this is not cheap yardage. This is not the Mountain West defense's stink. This guy is really, really good. And those numbers illustrate something. And if you want to diminish that, you're an idiot. And Travis Hunter, what you did there was you only heightened proof that Ashton Jeanty is probably going to win the Heisman Trophy if things hold up the way they are. Travis Hunter, I understand it. Like, he plays 2 positions. He's very gifted, very special. Cam Ward's still undefeated at Miami. We'll see how the rest of his season goes. Jalen Milroe's already got a loss. Dylan Gabriel obviously winning against Purdue, and they're continuing down their road potentially to go to perfection. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, listen, Ashton Jeanty's the best player in America. And it's just like you stack it side by side with those last 3 running back Heisman winners. It's not even close at this point. All right, let's get to week 8 real quick. Oregon beats Purdue, as I mentioned. They did cover the 30, which I thought was going to be a hard thing for them to do. All right, so UCLA's at Rutgers. This is a tough spot for UCLA. A noon Eastern kick, a 9 a.m. body clock kick. Not the big noon. Thank God they're not subjecting us to the big noon. But Rutgers coming off a couple of bad losses. They got kind of humbled by Wisconsin last week. So, yeah, Rutgers is favored by 5. Rutgers is going to destroy UCLA. UCLA with the long trip, and they're just not very good. This is a bad spot for UCLA in the early window in that spot. Arizona State at Cincinnati, a similar situation, but I have more faith that Arizona State, even though they're a 5.5 point underdog at Cincinnati. Cincinnati's kind of middle of the road, bottom tier in the Big 12. I'll take ASU, even though the starting quarterback Sam Levitt is going to miss this game. They go with Jeff Sims. I would expect to see a heavy diet of the running game. Maybe the wild scat with Cam Skattebo, who's one of the most underappreciated players in America. I got ASU getting a bowl eligibility and winning this game at Cincinnati. It's a tough spot for them, but I got faith in Kenny Dillingham with an extra. They played the Friday night game against Utah, so they got an extra day to prep for this game. So that's a little bit beneficial. But yeah, I'll ride with the Sun Devils. Forks up, man. I'm really impressed with what Kenny Dillingham's doing in his second year on the job in Tempe. NC State goes to Cal. Cal's favored by 10.5. Cal just plays a bunch of close games. They should win this game against NC State. NC State, really a massively disappointing team. Was expected to do a lot of great things in the ACC, and it's just not come together for them this year. I would expect Cal to win, but they won't cover the 10.5. I would expect this to be inside at 10 points. But Cal should win this game and get back on the winning track. Hawaii at Washington State. The Cougs at home, favored by 18.5 over the Rainbow Warriors. Hawaii's not very good, but they did play Boise State pretty tough at home. But yeah, this is a tough ask for Hawaii to go all the way over there. I would say Washington State covers here, wins pretty comfortably, and I expect John Mateer to have a really good game for the Cougs. And the Cougs have really righted the ship very well. I think this would get them to bowl eligibility, which would be very impressive after they missed out on a bowl last year. Really good job by Jake Dickert over there. USC goes to Maryland. Listen, this is a really interesting spot. Granted, I will say it's a 4 p.m. Eastern and a 1 p.m. Pacific body clock kick for USC. They're favored by 7.5. Maryland's just, really, they've been really disappointing. They got destroyed by Northwestern on a Friday night last week. USC should win this game. I have my concerns about them being on the road because they haven't won a true road game yet this year. USC should win this game pretty comfortably. Maryland is just not very good. Sorry to all my Maryland fans who I work with and who watch this video. Sorry to break it to you. Your Terrapins are just not very good right now. USC should win this game and get back on the winning track and on the right side of 500. Colorado goes to Arizona. Arizona favored by 2 at home. Arizona's really been, they've been kind of trying to figure this thing out. They had the Utah win, and then, they lose to Texas Tech. They lose to BYU. Colorado coming off, obviously, that stinging loss late Saturday night last week against Kansas State. Give me the Wildcats in this one. I'm really interested to see how Colorado picks itself up off a deflating loss like that. They've really impressed me with how they were able to fight back into that game. They were trailing for a big portion of that. But yeah, I would take Arizona in this game. Tucson's a tough place to go. And I think I really like Brent Brennan as a coach. It's just been really hard to figure this team out because, yes, they've got Fafita and Tetsuroa McMillan. They've got all these talented guys, Stukes and like all these other dudes on defense. It's just like it hasn't really come together consistently this season, but they're back at home. I would have faith in them over Coach Prime and the Buffs. SMU going to Stanford. SMU ranked in the top 25. Don't look now. Only one loss on the season. They've had a really solid start to their run. These are two of the new ACC teams. SMU favored by 16.5 at Stanford. Stanford's just not a great team right now. They had their big win already this season. This is one of the worst teams in the former Pac-12. It's one of the worst teams in the ACC. It's unfortunate because I really like Troy Taylor, but they're fighting a losing battle here against SMU. They don't really have much of a home field advantage. I would expect SMU to win pretty comfortably here. They're one of the better teams in the country. And don't look now. Maybe they can make some noise and potentially be a factor in the ACC this year. That'll be very interesting to watch. A very interesting late game between UNLV and Oregon State. UNLV favored by 6.5 on the road. UNLV has that one loss, that one blemish in overtime to Syracuse, which still stings, but they've been able to really pick themselves up. They haven't really missed the starter before the season, Matthew Sluka, because of that NIL dispute. So I give Barry Odom and his team a bunch of credit. But, man, Oregon State, Corvallis, Research Stadium, that is where teams go to die. It is a death trap, really, and I don't mean that because it's a mess of a state. I mean it because it is just a disaster for teams to go up there. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's loud in that stadium. It's just hard to win games, let alone in, I guess Pac-12 after dark, we'll call this one, or Mountain West after dark. I would take the Beavs in this game to win over UNLV and pull the upset. They had the deflating loss to Nevada last week, but I still think this team has been really impressive given the amount of talent that left them in terms of their coach in Jonathan Smith going to Michigan State, Aiden Childs following him, Damian Martinez leaving. They lost so many big key pieces, and they've still been able to write this thing together and looked pretty impressive so far this season. And then TCU at Utah. Utah's favored by 3.5 at home in Salt Lake City. Rice Eccles is a hard place to play. TCU's middle of the road. Give me the Utes and Kyle Whittingham. It'll be interesting to see how Isaac Wilson plays because he might be the future at quarterback for this team. Given we don't know if Cam Rising's going to come back for an 8th season. But yeah, give me the Utes here. But unfortunately, their ceiling is not very high now without Cam Rising in there for the rest of the season, which stinks. So that's Week 8. That's the West Coast Best Coast Football Show. We'll have more reaction following the games with a post-game show after all these games conclude. You could probably get that late Saturday night, early Sunday morning before you get into NFL stuff. We'll have a lot more great sports content throughout the weekend. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you guys real soon. Bye-bye.